So thank you for joining us. This is the Alliance for Water Efficiency webinar called Smart Practices to Save Water, an evaluation of AMI-enabled leak notification programs. My name is Liesel. I'm with the Alliance for Water Efficiency. I'm the Director of Programs, and I'll be walking you through this webinar today. It'll be about 60 minutes. It will be recorded, so if you want to go back and watch it again later, the slides and the recording will be available for folks. And if you have a question, you can use the Q&A function, and our staff, we have Rachel in the background, will help us moderate that. We'll be saving the question answers for the end of the webinar today, but you can go ahead and pop them in kind of as they come to you. So speakers today, and myself, Liesel, and then we have 3 folks from our report that participated in our project and our study. We have William and Kevin and Greg, who I'll introduce more later, but we've got some great faces here and a great panel up ahead. So thank you all, thank you to them for participating with the project, but also for participating in the webinar today. So I've got some additional thank yous. So first of all, we are very grateful to the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, who provided a grant that made this research possible through their innovative conservation program. And second, thank you to the 4 agencies, 3 of which are with us today, who are willing to participate in the study, provide funding, and most importantly, provide data and information about their leak notification programs. And third, a thank you to our very talented consultants, David Mitchell and Don Schlanger. David, who had previously worked with the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission and agreed to help with the analysis for the other communities. And then Don, who is an AMI expert and conducted literature review and many interviews to help supplement what is a very limited research pool out there. And finally, check out the full report, which is now live online this morning, which has a huge chunk of an acknowledgement for folks from lots of different agencies who contributed through interviews or reviewing documents, reviewing the utility survey I'll talk about, and a whole lot more. So this was a really great team effort, and I'm really proud of the result. So this project took on looking at AMI-enabled leak notification programs. These are often one of the initial ways that people think about using their AMI data when they get into an advanced metering infrastructure system. AMI is kind of an integrated network of lots of things, meters and sensors and collectors, data management systems, all these sorts of things. But it allows a 2-way communication between the utility and the meter. You don't have to do manual reading anymore. It allows for a whole new world of operating as a utility. So here's some kind of key terms to consider for the course of our time together this morning. AMI, advanced metering infrastructure. A leak, in this case, we're thinking of it as continuous consumption. With AMI, we focused in on hourly meter reads. So continuous consumption is defined by both a minimum time threshold, so how long that continuous usage is happening, and a minimum amount of flow, so a minimum amount of water that has to be occurring every hour for that time threshold. And at that point, that's defined as a leak, and every utility has a different approach for that. Proactive, in this case, means before the bill is delivered. So they're getting some sort of information signal ahead of when they might get a high or unusual bill. And the sooner the better, as you'll see. So the kind of key takeaways of what are the smart practices to save water through these types of programs. Some key nuggets we'll give you right up front is to use an opt-out approach. So all meters should be eligible. All are automatically enrolled. Depending on your communication method, you might need people to opt in or opt out of those sorts of things, but you don't want people to have to take action to be eligible for a leak notification. You want to be able to use and analyze data all days of the week, 24 hours a day, so you don't miss leaks. Ideally, you use different types of communication channels. Some people prefer the letters, and that's really effective. Some people are more receptive to email or text or other sorts of things, and ability to send it through multiple channels can be really critical. And notifying customers as quickly as possible is really critical. Customers are going to find and fix leaks to some extent on their own, and the whole goal here is to either stop leaks from happening in the first place, fix leaks for good, or help stop leaks faster than they would have otherwise. And ideally, you incorporate some sort of next steps. So don't leave the customer hanging. Point them to a customer portal where they can look at their water use and see when the water use started. Point them to a how-to guide, some sort of tips and tricks, how to use dye tabs to figure out if your toilet's leaking, things like that. Another level up is a leak inspection service or a leak repair service, things like that. So these are some core pieces, and I'll talk a little bit more about a forthcoming guide that will deep dive into this more. So let's get into the case studies. I am gonna turn off my camera during this section. So we have 4 case studies that participated in this, 3 in California and 1 in Texas. And you'll see here the customer categories. All of them had a single family program that contributed data. 3 of them contributed data for kind of small multifamily program. And then the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission contributed data for their dedicated irrigation meter program or large landscape programs. They had both a municipal approach for municipal customers as well as non-municipal customers. So we'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. And then here are the minimum flow thresholds, the minimum time thresholds, and the way that they went about contacting customers after they were flagged of potentially having a leak. So 3 of the utilities used 1 cubic foot for their flow threshold that had to be occurring over a certain amount of time. And those same 3 also used 72 hours as their threshold. City of Sacramento is a little bit different than they had 2 different thresholds for single family and multifamily, and they had a slightly longer time threshold. And I'll point out that these are all the thresholds that were in place at the time of the study. So each organization has likely evolved, and there's more information about that in the full report about how it's operating today. But these are the parameters that were in place at the time of the study. Each of them had kind of a snail mail approach. 2 of them sent automated letters. Sacramento Suburban sent postcards twice a month. And then San Francisco was the only one that had multiple outreach channels, so automated letters, that should say automated emails on that first one. They also had like a robocall option as well as an SMS text option. And then for their dedicated irrigation meters, municipal versus non-municipal, the municipal group was at the time a very kind of manual process and slower, whereas the non-municipal group was a more automated process, much quicker notification. So what do these notifications look like? Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here, I've included some screenshots of examples. Here's Fort Worth's. Cool thing about this one is that they have it completely translated in Spanish on the front page. You don't have to flip it over and read it on the back or anything like that. It gives clear information about what the reason for the notification is and what the customer can do about it, and gives a little bit of information about pointing to a website, a portal, financial assistance may be available. Sacramento Suburban takes the approach of postcards, and so this is what it looks like. It gives a little bit of information about leaks, some little tips and tricks for how to go about addressing them, and it talks about it as a courtesy notice. So some people are nervous about kind of liability and who's responsible for given the power to send these notifications. So it looks like you've got a leak. Other ones are talking about, Fort Worth talks about courtesy. These are sort of nice words to incorporate. And then here is Sacramento, and then the San Francisco ones. Sacramento is nice in that it incorporates some actual water use information about what they're expecting to see, nicely customized for the customer. And it points them to a portal, and it also points them to a free site visit and an inspection. So really nice next step for folks that are feeling lost or stuck and being able to find what's going on. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the San Francisco piece. One nice thing I'll point about this one, they also do multiple languages. They do text and email. You can see that that's nicely customized, and it also incorporates when the leak started, which is always a nice point of like, okay, what was going on in that day? It also points to portals and a website with some information about fixing leaks. I'm going to point a little bit more out about each of the case studies that we use today. So first, notice the difference in average daily usage. Again, this is during those time periods, which I've also got here. But you can see that San Francisco, much lower average water use. It's largely an indoor water use community, whereas the others have much more significant outdoor water use, larger properties, those sorts of things, which is also reflected in the summer to winter ratio of water use. See San Francisco pretty consistent throughout the year, whereas the others have kind of pretty significant peaks. And finally, you can see the program period. In order to do this analysis, we had to have a 9 months to about a year, ideally, of AMI data before the program launched to be able to characterize the leaks in the absence of a program. So for these utilities, that happened at different points because they launched their programs at different points. And so it's not quite apples to apples. You can also see that some of these time periods, there were some interesting things happening in the world, something like a drought or a global pandemic. So there are other things that are likely influencing water use during these time periods. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about evaluation. So let's start talking about what we learned about leaks. So first I'm going to orient you to this bar chart. So we're going to start with Fort Worth. And on the left-hand side, you see a breakdown of percentage of meters. So you'll see that 87.5% in the 9-month pre-program period did not get flagged with a leak, as defined by Fort Worth, which was 1 cubic foot over 72 hours, continuously over 72 hours. Whereas 9.6 had between 1 and 9 leaks over that time period. And then the little arrow shows you that that correlates to 36.2% of the water associated with leaks during this 9-month time period. And then you see up at the top, 2.9% of customers translate to 63.8% of the leak volume. So a small portion of homes are responsible for a really big proportion of the overall water waste or water loss due to leaks. So I'll reveal for the rest, different numbers, but you can see a similar trend across the board. You see over there in San Francisco, you've got 0.2% of customers are responsible for nearly 19% of water loss due to leaks. And I'll point out that some of these are 9 months, some of these are 12 months, so it's not quite apples to apples across the communities. So for example, in Fort Worth and San Francisco, if we had a full year of data, we would imagine that there would be more customers that got flagged with leaks than what you see here in the chart. Next, leaks can really add up for an individual home that has one. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the leak volume in orange relative to total water usage during the leak events. And this is summed up across all the customers that had leaks in the pre-program period. So it ranges a little bit, but it's a good chunk. And depending on your billing structure and your rates, this can really add up to a pretty significant bill. If we look at overall water usage, we combine the fact that the majority of homes don't have leaks, and then you kind of scale it upwards, you can see that overall leaks account for a small portion of overall water usage. So it matters a lot to the individual, doesn't show up quite as much when you look at overall water usage. So that's a little bit about the pre-program periods and characterizations of leaks. There's a bit more in the report. The impact evaluation approach. So in this particular case, while it was great that we had pre-program data so we could characterize leaks before the program started, ideally we would move forward with having a control group so that even once the notifications were live, we have some group of customers that were not getting notifications so that we can better control for other things that might be influencing water use. And so the result here is we ended up taking a difference in means approach, which basically means we calculate a set of leak metrics, which are listed here for both before and after the program implementation periods. And then what we do is we do regression analysis to help determine if there's statistically difference in those 2 time periods. And so there are likely other non-observed factors at play that we're not controlling for. And so the differences are likely somewhat attributable to something other than or in addition to the notification program, I should say. And so while we're pretty confident that the notification program in some of these instances is making a big difference, we don't know exactly how much of the difference is. So we're making the leap that what the savings that we present today is the full impact, but we know that there are probably some other things at play as well here. So ideally you go about this with a randomized control trial, again, where you take a phased approach. Some customers get it before others, and then it allows you to fully understand what's going on with your program, and it helps you to troubleshoot and figure out what's the most effective, and then you can help learn and make the most of your AMI investment, make the most of how you're approaching your program, and ultimately serve your customers better. So what happened? We found that programs with timely notifications have a big impact. So in the solid orange, you see these big reductions for 3 of the 4 single-family programs. All of those were statistically significant. For Sacramento Suburban, it wasn't statistically significant. It looks like a 13% increase, but it's actually not statistically different from 0. So don't try to make the leap that their program caused leaks. That's not what happened. But it was the program that had a really long lag time from flagging of the notification to when customers were identified. It could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks before folks were getting their notification, whereas all the others were a very automated process very near after when the leak was flagged. Sacramento, potential bonus here is that they offer a free leak repair service. So that might be helping drive reduction in water waste from leaks. San Francisco is the only program to use those multiple communication methods. So that might be driving some of the larger influence there. And note that reductions can stem from kind of 2 components, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. So how much water was saved overall? Well, it depends. And so here is annualized savings in gallons per meter per day. And so that's annualized across all of the eligible meters, annualized across a full year's worth of time. So we take the savings from the results and scale them up that way. And so you can see some differences. You would expect, you can see the results here for both multifamily and dedicated irrigation meters. Again, for Sacramento Suburban, which had a large lag time, their multifamily program didn't generate any statistically significant results. Same for San Francisco and their municipal program. At the time, it was a manual process. It was slower, didn't see those statistically significant results. Whereas when they had those more automated programs, saw really big annual savings in gallons per meter per day for that, for their DIM program. If you scale this up, so this is in gallons per meter per day, now looking at what the potential savings is across your entire service area. Fort Worth obviously has a lot of single family homes. You scale it up, the estimates for savings is quite high, so 165 million gallons in their case. Sacramento, 127 million gallons. San Francisco, they do have a lot of single family customers, but they have a smaller overall savings to begin with per meter. So it scales up to be a little bit less, well, chunk less. And that's partly, I think, driven that San Francisco has lower water use to begin with and less outdoor water use, whereas Fort Worth and Sacramento both have higher average outdoor water use, higher average water use to begin with, and then also has significant peaking. So some of the leaks that they were probably tackling through this are larger leaks driven by irrigation systems. And so you can see total savings for like multifamily and dedicated irrigation meter programs look like smaller numbers, but that's just driven because they have smaller total numbers of customers in those customer classes, but still really, really solid potential for savings across these programs. And leaks are the ultimate low-hanging fruit that grows back. So even if you help fix a leak, typically they will continue to occur. So how do notifications ultimately save water? Well, there's a couple of ways. One, in this particular setting, I mean, technically you could help reduce the flow rate, how much volume is going. That's not typically what's happening. You're really either reducing how long those leaks are lasting, so helping them stop and get resolved sooner, or you're helping drive and influence change that's helping stop leaks from starting to begin with. And so for across these various programs, here is the summary of the change in the overall leak volume, so the water loss due to leaks. I've highlighted the ones that were statistically significant. And then let's look at which drivers or which levers were influencing these results. In some of the programs, both levers were changed, so they were effective at both reducing the average leak duration, so how long leaks were lasting, as well as affecting helping customers sort of stop leaks from starting to begin with. So it might be that they helped stop a leaky toilet. Customer either made the fix or replaced the toilet, and otherwise the leaks might have continued to occur. In this case, it helped stop it from recurring. In some, they only changed one lever, so it varies across the board. And in some of these cases, there are some customers that have long leaks or very large leaks or very persistent leaks, and they're just hanging out there on the long tail of this whole spectrum. And so we're finding, again, going back to that initial result of showing a very few amount of customers are responsible for a lot of water use. Those might be the ones that are harder to reach, but would make a bigger impact if you're able to work with them and reach them. So they might be worthy of a little bit more additional outreach, whether that's a phone call or dropping by with a door tag or something like that. So there's a lot more in this report. It's a super beefy report, but here's a few nuggets that we pulled out before I'm going to switch into the panel of folks that we have here. So across the 4 case studies, waterways can be a big chunk. So while a customer is having a leak, it can be between 20 and 50% of their total household use. That can be a lot, and again, make a big difference on their bill potentially. We found about 500 to, in another community, 2,500 upwards gallons per household are lost to leaks every year. And we've got a good, this small chunk of households that experience either recurring leaks or multiple types of leaks per year, but they represent a big chunk of water loss. So again, those might be the customers to try to figure out how to troubleshoot with. And then there's more information in the report about some averages of like leak rates and leak durations. So if you're further wanting to understand maybe how quickly you need to contact customers to actually be effective, you do really need it to be pretty timely. And for example, at San Francisco, they've adapted their program to, instead of focusing on 72 hours, I think they've dialed it back to 48 hours, recognizing that we can probably contact customers that much sooner without potential risk of sort of false positives. And so what did we learn about leak notification programs? They can be very effective at reducing water loss, but they must be timely to actually save water. Another nugget that was from that other slide, talking about how it really can help reduce how long leaks last. In the report, San Francisco shared some of their survey results they've conducted with their single-family customers and found that 77% of customers were not even aware that that usage was happening before the notification. So really nice, robust result from there, and can contribute big chunk of savings. If you're looking at in terms of total annual water use, it's a small portion, but it can contribute overall to your savings portfolio and can make a big difference for those households who are experiencing this. So while we did these 4 case studies, we also wanted to understand what was happening in utilities across beyond these 4 case studies. And so we conducted a survey last summer. We ultimately got 102 complete responses. And so here are some nuggets, and there's a whole bunch more in the report. So of those 102, 56 utilities reported that they do some sort of continuous consumption-based leak notification program. And a chunk of those also offer some sort of high flow notification. Thresholds vary a lot. People are still trial and erroring with this. They're playing around with this. Sometimes they change them on purpose so that they can reduce the number of notifications that are going out because they don't have the staff capacity to address any calls that are coming in. So you can see there's a huge variation. Here in green, these are all the different minimum flow thresholds. So some common-ish ones at like 1 gallon per hour or 1 cubic foot, which is 7.48 gallons per hour, but it's across the spectrum. There's a lot more consistency in the time threshold that people use. So pretty much all either pick 24 hours or 72 hours as their continuous time threshold. Opt-in versus out, as well as communication, varied across a lot of programs too. So we asked which types of methods they used and if they require their customer to opt in. The most common method that people need to opt into was text, unsurprisingly, and the least one that they have to opt into is letter. That's the most common one that people will just send out, regardless of whether or not you've opted into the program or the communication method. That's usually sort of the backup if none of these other options work. Also makes sense for door hangers. People don't necessarily need to opt in for that, or calls by staff don't need to opt into that. But you can see there's a variety of methods used and a lot more beyond just the typical letter. Here's a few additional survey takeaways. A good chunk of utilities, and I'd say the majority, had felt that the notification program had lowered or reduced their high bill complaints. Some of them talked about how it had shifted sort of the customer engagement from after the bill and talking about what had happened and all of that happens after a bill is already in place and the meter has been read, to shifting the engagement to being before the bill and talking about, okay, do you want to maybe participate in our toilet rebate program, or can we send out someone to perform a free inspection service or something like that. A good chunk of utilities have some sort of courtesy bill adjustment policy for customers who have leaks and demonstrate that they took the steps to repair this. They can get a reprieve from their higher bills during that time period. Some did talk about how they plan to explore adapting this policy, given that they do have the ability to proactively notify customers. I was surprised at how many customers are able to offer free or subsidized leak inspections or audits, which is fantastic. Majority of the utilities had some sort of water waste code in place. And connecting to some other work that we all work on is most of the utilities have some sort of annual water loss audit process, and bonus, 84% of those have conservation staff as part of that team. The report includes a whole lot more, including things like this, where we ask what are their challenges. So if you're out there as a vendor or a software solution or other folks like this, be aware that these are the bigger challenges that utilities are facing with implementing these programs effectively. So I'm going to give you a few additional resources, and then we're going to switch gears into the panel. So here's a few resources out there that range from folks that are sort of just at the beginning of the stage of just exploring AMI transition. So whether you need a template, an RFP template for requesting information about AMI solutions, as well as the advanced metering infrastructure guidance that Don did, which was fantastic. Resources about customer portals and other types of kind of foundational analytics pieces. And then EPA recently came out with one that's focused for facility managers, which is a really nice resource. So you can access the full report online. I've got a link here. And then forthcoming will be kind of a companion utility guide. We found this report to end up being really a beefy report, and so we are going to split out and create a guidebook that has a little bit more high-level information about the different components to consider for an effective notification program, the different type of staff you might want to have working together on a type of program, policies you might want to consider either adding or adapting, the different metrics you might use to track success for your program, considerations for program setup and evaluation, and a bit more about CII customers, which is the next frontier of leak notification programs and is the next era that people are playing around with. I think we found that utilities were twice as likely to have a single family program as they were to have any other customer class type of notification program. So next for the Alliance, I'll just give a shout out. We have another webinar tomorrow with our partner EPA WaterSense. So if you can't get enough of webinars this week, come on down for that one. And then we are working on a new research project that's going to be focusing on gathering all of the use cases that we can possibly come up with for how AMI can be leveraged for conservation and efficiency efforts, among others, as we discover them. So if this is something you might and your agency might be interested in participating, please reach out. And then if you just want to join the ongoing conversation, we help coordinate a users group, which we call CAMI, Conservation Plus AMI. So if you're interested in joining that group and you want to continue learning about it and learning from your peers who are also in the weeds with AMI, that's a great resource. And then finally, I have to plug, we have our new Water Efficiency and Conservation Symposium in August this summer. I'm very excited for the program. Abstracts are due this Friday, so that's why I'm putting a plug in. So come on down. We've already got a lot of great abstracts in, and I'm really excited to see what else comes in before the deadline. So with that, I am going to switch to our utility panel. So we're going to bring cameras back on so you can see their lovely faces. And then I will introduce everybody once they're up here. There we go. Okay, so first we have William Granger, who's Water Conservation Coordinator with City of Sacramento. He's been with City of Sacramento for 10 years and nearly 29 years overall in the water efficiency field. He joined the city as they were transitioning to AMI, and so they saw great work that San Francisco was doing, and they worked to set up their own automated leak alert program for their single family residential. The small, they also have irrigation and some commercial customer programs too, which you can learn more about in the report. And they started that leak program in 2017. Then we have Kevin Galvin, which is he's with the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. He's the Water Conservation Administrator. He's been there 10 years. And he's been leading their automated leak alert notification program for several years, starting from the beginning days with their initial pilot program to what is now a very smooth running, fully automated program. And then last but not least, we have Greg with us, who's a Conservation and Communications Supervisor at Sacramento Suburban Water District. And he's been there for 11 years, but really part of the water industry for effectively his whole life. And he helps the operation teams develop this continuous consumption program, and it's helped find leaks for some of them. And it's a really appreciated program. And it's been great to have him participate in this program to help demonstrate a range of the different types of programs. And hopefully this can help spur interest in finding solutions that can lead to more automated or quicker notification processes. So welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today. I have a few questions of my own, and then we will open it up and see what questions we have from the audience. And Kevin is the only one that's off camera, but he is there. So if folks are wondering if he's available for questioning, he is. So we'll start with this first question I have is understanding what's evolved in the program. We talked about what we studied, but new, what has changed for you? So I will start with William.
All right, so what's evolved in our leak notification program since we started in 2017? Essentially, we've been playing around more and more with the thresholds, both for mostly our residential single family customers that get the bulk of our letters. You mentioned 120 hours is our threshold. We've lowered it, raised it throughout the year. So that's a big change, and added more customers, as many as we possibly can, not just single family, but small multifamily as well.
Great, thank you. I will shift to Greg next. You're a little quiet, Greg. We'll switch to Kevin. See if we can get Kevin while you figure it out. Kevin,
hi everyone, Kevin Galvin here. SFPUC's automated leak alert program, as mentioned by Liesel, has evolved significantly since it began. Originally, we launched as a pilot program that was manually mailing postcards once a week, and kind of learning from the limitations of the pilot, we worked to customize a notification system to automate alerts, allowing for auto-generated text, email, phone call, and letter. We started alerting single family, small multifamily first because their water use consumption patterns are more straightforward, then added irrigation accounts, and we layered in, after some analysis, commercial and large multifamily, and most recently added all municipal. So at this point, we're notifying all of our customer sectors in our service area through the program.
That's fantastic. Greg, we're gonna give you another shot.
Okay, I think I got this figured out. Yeah. So our program, in all honesty, hasn't evolved that much over the years. We're still sending out postcards once a year. The biggest evolution we've had is in our data quality. So we're collecting more information from customers who have leaks. Our AMI system is relatively young, so to speak. We're actually 100% AMI now. So we've gone from sending out 200 to 300 postcards a month to about 12 to 1,500 a month. So the customer response has kind of stayed the same. It's very low. Customers still kind of look at this as a junk mail type flyer, but having the raw data gives us the ability to contact customers, kind of cold call them, because we have some phone numbers. So that's been our greatest success, is being able to cold call customers, set up those leak investigations, and go out and find and help those customers find the leaks.
That's great. Thank you all. The next question I have is understanding what's something you're working on right now, and some of you alluded to this a little bit, but what's challenge or an improvement that you're trying to incorporate with your program, or something you're working through right now? We'll start with reorder. We'll start with Kevin.
So right now, we've been fine-tuning our thresholds. As you mentioned, we went from 72 hours to 48 hours for single family, small multifamily, and irrigation accounts. And we've automated all of our municipal notifications, including irrigation and non-irrigation accounts. So really just getting all of our customers in the automated notification process. And then we've just completed making improvements to our notification system in order to increase the quantity and speed that the messages can be sent out. And we're doing that because we're looking at sending additional messaging associated with like agency welcome notifications with conservation messaging, rain event irrigation alerts, and high user alerts. So we're looking at additional ways to leverage our AMI program.
That's fantastic. Let's go to William.
Gosh, it's tough to just pick one challenge. So on my wish list is to crack the nut on the larger multifamily. So that is something that we initially said to our IT department, hey, we'd love to be able to reach out to them. We drew the line at our fourplexes. So it is something that I do want to circle back on, see if maybe there are some agencies that have figured that out, or have some ideas. We continue to evolve our letters. I'd love to strengthen the wording of them. The challenge is getting time with our IT department. So that is something that we continue to change. And I'd say right now our first letter that we send out and then the one that follows 2 months later, if the leak still exists, they look nearly identical. So I'm thinking of changing that, and if we can, maybe reference how much water's been lost since that 2-month period, not just the annual figure that I think you showed in our draft letter.
That's great. Before I go to you, Greg, Kevin, did you want to chime in a little bit about how you guys zeroed in on your larger multifamily or some of your commercial categories and how you came to decide how you go about approaching them?
Sure. So, for large multifamily and commercial, their water use patterns can be all over the place. And, there's a reason why we tackled that last was because, grasping like what is an actual leak at a facility that may use water 24 hours a day can be pretty tricky. And where we landed is really identifying anomalous consumption for the site. So we look at we compare sites that have constant consumption of 1 cubic foot per hour for 3 days. And we look at their late night consumption between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. and compare that to we look for spikes basically of 2 or 4x in late night consumption and use that as an indicator that they have something going on at their site to send a notification that could be a leak.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I know, yeah, it's a bit of a trial and error process, but it's fascinating to see the kind of different components coming together to result in a good algorithm.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and we're continuing to look at our thresholds and test our data and look to see, are we having any false positives? We're getting customer feedback through surveys about them. So we're still learning about this and still, dialing in our thresholds for those notifications.
Makes sense. Well, we'll keep an eye on you all and invite you back for a future panel. Greg, what's something you all are working on?
So our biggest challenge, it's interesting because being is that we retrofitted our non-metered customers to metered AMI. We use 2 different AMI systems. Technically, right now we use 3. We have a Mueller product, Badger, and Census. So having a customer portal that can send out automated leak alerts is challenging. So we can't necessarily use the Census product backend for the customers or the Beacon product from Badger because that customers, they may be changed out. They may have a Badger meter this year, that meter goes bad, they may have a Census meter the next year. So it's about finding a way to consolidate all this data and integrating it into a portal system that customers log into where they pay their bill, and then they can transition over to that system. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges, and something that we're currently working on is figuring out what system we need to integrate into our current billing system, so we don't have customers logging in to 2 or 3 different places to pay their bill, check their water consumption, find those alerts.
That makes sense. William or Kevin, do you have anything to chime in on single sign-on and multiple utility systems?
We'd love to get there. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I agree. Single sign-on would be really nice. Our customer care and billing portal is separate from our leak alert or our AMI portal. We would love to get to single sign-on and help streamline that for customers.
That makes sense. So we will go to our last question, then we'll open it up to the audience. So last question is, what is your advice to other utilities that are in the weeds with you or looking to start a program? What would you share? I'll start with Greg this time.
Yeah, I know that our results we got the results I was hoping to get, is basically showing that we need to evolve this program for it to be effective. Like, we are contacting a lot of customers. We are working with a lot of customers that have leaks, and we are fixing leaks that we do find. My advice would be to do it. If you're on the cusp, absolutely do it. Customers love this service. The customers that do pay attention and that you do reach out to, you create such a positive customer interaction, because we've helped a guy find a leak in his hot water line underneath his kitchen that he didn't know was there, just based on the fact that there was steam coming out on a cold day from a vent in his crawl space. And it was 22 gallons an hour. It had been leaking for 4 days. We shut the hot water heater off and it was done. And that was a $5,000 fix for him, but he was so excited because all that hot water was getting under his house. It was going to cause mold this summertime. It was going to cause a whole lot more problems if we hadn't have worked with, if he hadn't have got those notifications from us. So even if your program is starting off with the bare basics, with just a postcard, start the process. It's so worth it. The customer appreciation itself is well worth it.
Thank you, Greg. We'll go to William next.
All right, so my word of advice would be to take your IT department out to lunch, and seriously, what we've been able to do is because of looking at San Francisco PUC and kind of modeling after them. It took a while, and I would say if I was to start over again, I would definitely make some bigger changes between the letters that we send out 2 months apart. But I would also say I would push harder to see if, because it took so long, because they have other priorities, to try to get maybe more email addresses. That is our big limitation. We are locked into just having letters as our point of contact with customers. So if you can push for that, maybe your agency can also get updated phone numbers and and email addresses. There's different ways to notice customers. Some people prefer the email. They prefer maybe that semi-robocall versus just the letter that we send out, and then it may sit a couple days or longer before the customer actually reads it.
Thank you. And last but not least, Kevin, what's your advice?
I have a few points of advice, and several of them were touched on. But data, if you're collecting data, AMI data, it's really valuable, and you want to keep and store that for program testing and impact analysis, similar to the studies that was done here that we're discussing today. Testing, so you can run analysis on data prior to launching your program to kind of gauge the level of response you might receive from your customers, how many leaks you may identify, and how much notification you might be sending. So if you can, use that data to test before launching your program. Tone in messaging is really important. So when you send out the messages, we're really trying to strike a balance where customers take it seriously, but we don't cause a panic. We don't want customers running out of a restaurant, in the middle of a meal thinking that their house is flooding, but we do want them to take the leak alert notifications seriously. Organizing your data, what are you going to do with all this AMI data when you have it and you start channeling it into a leak alert program? How are you going to store it? How are you going to define a leak and thresholds and know who's triggered which thresholds and when? So having a good plan and being organized when you start. Involving your customer service and inspection staff is key. They're going to be the ones that are going out in the field and taking customer calls resulting from your program. And then kind of possibly start with single family and small multifamily first, as their consumption patterns are more straightforward, and then layer on other customer sectors as your program continues to evolve.
Great, thank you all. Fabulous advice across the board. I am going to call up Rachel now to help moderate any questions. So you can use the question and answer function. I imagine we already have some in here, and here's some other reminders. Rachel, what have we got?
Yeah, we have everyone is really interested, so thank you all for sharing. A lot of our questions I think have been touched on, so I'll give them to you, and if you could give us a little more detail on those subjects. But first, I think the very first one is, how did San Francisco get customer info to send the notifications beyond just snail mail. I know that you guys alluded to how that's a barrier, but how did you get that info?
Sure, I'll address that question. So really our customer care and billing system that has all of our account customer information, that information is accessed by our notification system. So we're able to draw on what we have within our system. And, I think as William mentioned, having up-to-date customer contact info is a major hurdle and challenge for water agencies. And I think it's going to be something we need to focus on moving forward. Right about now, we have about 50% email rate for our customers. And email we find to be one of the more effective ways to communicate our leak alert info. But basically getting our customer care and billing system to talk with our leak alert program messaging system is how we're able to utilize that info.
Kevin, can you speak at all to how maybe how your customer care groups have prioritized that, or maybe are going to prioritize that? I know some utilities are maybe more hesitant to ask for an email address or ask if they have a textable mobile number. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, we ask all of our customers when they sign up for a new account to provide an email, knowing that that's going to be the most effective way to contact them, or one of the most effective ways, and phone number and cell. So we're actively doing that whenever customers sign up for new accounts, but accounts are changing on a regular basis, and it's not easy to keep the best contact information available, but we're working with what we have. And then what we do is we kind of prioritize how we send our notifications. So if we send an email or a text, then we don't necessarily send a letter, but we do have everyone's address, so we can send letters to everyone. So that way our messaging is getting out to everyone, even if we don't have email or phone.
Thank you. Rachel, back to you.
Yeah, a couple of questions about how you did the CII data. So that the study focused on single family, multifamily. And I know you all touched on this a little bit, but do you collect data from the CII sector? Do you send leak notifications to the CII? And could you go over your thresholds again? I think, Kevin, you said those a little bit. So those are all kind of related.
Sure, I'll just try to add.
Yeah, Kevin first.
I'll just briefly talk about that. So we do send messages to CII customers. We initially did an analysis looking for water consumption patterns based on SIC code, or like if there was groupings like gas stations or different types of commercial properties that would have patterns that we could build thresholds on. And really we found that not to be the case. We found that like comparing their consumption to their own average was the best way to identify if they had a potential leak. So we do that looking at, as I mentioned, late night consumption from 1 to 4 a.m. And we're looking for a spike. So if we see a 2 to 4 times spike in late night consumption, we think that there's something going on at that site as far as potential leak, and we'll send notification to them.
I know you do some notifications of commercial properties. Can you talk about your approach?
Sure. So we looked at we have about 32 different premise codes, and a couple of them seem to us to be pretty straightforward, that we could reach out to those customers, those commercial customers, and let them know that they have a leak. So we have a premise code for churches, cemeteries very, very much irrigation only. Churches are pretty much straightforward, similar, very, very similar to single family. So for those more basic commercial accounts, and also office buildings tend to be pretty straightforward. We do have thresholds and send out letters. The bulk of our letters go out to single family, no surprise, and our small multifamily, but we do have some customers, commercial customers, that get our letters and call us up, and so we'll go out there and do research. The threshold is a lot higher because sometimes the meters are a bit larger. So it's not like what Kevin was talking about where there's a spike, it's just continuous usage, but the threshold's set a bit higher.
Greg, do you want to chime in at all on CII?
Sure. So one of the limitations we have, well, there's a couple, but the primary limitation we have is staff time. It's for right now, it's our program is just myself and one field tech and 2 interns. So when we started our continual flow program, it added a tremendous amount of staff time onto our field technician, and that's why we have interns year round now. And when we look at when we prioritized the program, we prioritized single family because 78% of our consumption comes from our residential customers. So it was kind of like, how much are we willing to spend on our CII side with the resources that we have? It just kind of made more sense for us to focus more on our single family customers. That's really where our biggest challenge lies, is staffing. So if you're going to do this program, if you really want to do it right, be prepared that this existing staff you have, their workload is going to increase, and it could increase to the point where another full-time equivalent is required to balance everything out. Because we're still doing water wise house calls, we're still doing everything else, water waste patrol, everything. So
that's a great point. The full report has the results we asked in the survey about how much staff time folks are kind of ballparking for their leak notification program, so folks can dig into the different ranges of responses there. But yeah, everybody reported something, not zero. Rachel, what else do we have?
Yeah, we have a couple questions about how do you handle non-responsive, specifically like multifamily customers. How do you get them to fix their leaks? Do you have a fine in place for non-responsive leak customers?
Who wants to start with that one? Greg?
I'll start. So when we created this program, our board of directors basically said this program is not to be used as an enforcement tool, because it gets into the big brother aspect of AMI and water utilities, and the amount of staff time that it would take to go through the process. Because our process is like, if you have a leak that's running off your property, like if you're flooding a neighbor or flooding the gutter or something like that, we'll give you a 7-day notice to repair the leak. And then if you don't repair it in 7 days, then we go to a 48-hour notice, then a 24-hour notice, and then we tell you we're going to shut you off. Well, if I was to do that, I just sent out 800 postcards last week. Some of those customers are on the list over and over again. So the staff time and the staff resources to reorganize the data to make sure that I'm capturing, okay, these people have had a leak for 7 days, so now we got to give those people 48-hour notices. Then we got to give the 24-hour notices and to do all the follow-up, and then all the shutoffs if they don't fix their leaks. It really staff intensive. So our board just basically said, use this as a customer notification tool. Give them as many resources as you can to help them find the leak and repair the leak. So we started as part of the DWRs, or the California Department of Water Resources Prop 1 grant program. We give out rebates for leak repair, and it doesn't matter the size of the leak. It doesn't matter how long it's been leaking. If you've repaired a leak, just turn your invoice into us and we'll help cover some of the cost of it. And that's actually inspired a lot of people to fix their leaks faster. A lot of customers say it was cost per hit. It was basically because our water is cheap. We don't have very high water rates. So are you really going to tear apart your whole bathroom to fix a shower that's dripping once every minute? You're going to pay $3,000 to save 50 to 60 bucks worth of water. But if we're offering those rebate incentives, then customers are starting to say, okay, yeah, we'll take on those projects now. So yeah, long-winded answer for us.
That's great. William, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so like Greg, we also have a leak repair rebate. In addition to that, in our disadvantaged areas, we have a plumber on retainer that if they qualify, it's very similar to a program that San Antonio has, but if the customer qualifies, then they can have the plumber do the repair. The question I heard was about follow-up, and so we'll send out letters every 2 months, and then we have an intern that'll look at those what we call long-standing leaks and the largest leaks, and start reaching out to people, because some folks are just, they continue to get letters every 2 months and it piles up. So we're telling them, hey, we have these 2 program options for you. As far as fines, if it's an outdoor leak, then they could get fined. I would add to what Greg said. He mentioned, I think, a 7-day shut off notice. We have a 5-day. Essentially, it's a 5 to 7 day shut off notice, and we're just about to send one out tomorrow. So the customer has gotten leak letters from us, but also the community has complained about the water flowing over the sidewalk. So if it's a slip hazard, we're out there right away. We're trying to make them aware of the rebate repair option if they don't qualify for the plumber to repair for themselves. So that's where we may find somebody for having a leak, is if it's a slip hazard.
Kevin, any final contributions for this question of sort of non-responsive customers?
Yeah, just real quickly. We send 3 rounds of notifications, one after 2 to 3 days, one after 2 weeks, and one about 4 weeks after that. If the leak is still ongoing, we'll dispatch one of our water conservation inspectors to the property, and they'll, if no one's there to talk to, they'll provide a door hanger for the site. And then we do phone call follow-ups on some long-term leakers. So we're really trying to get the message to them, because they may not see the email or the text, but if we physically go put a door hanger there, they're likely to see that. Similar to the other programs, it's a courtesy program, so it's not an enforcement program, and we don't have fines for long-term leakers. If there was a case of like a waste of water where it was, as William mentioned, becoming a hazard, we could potentially shut the water off there. But generally, customers are fixing their leaks and then participating in kind of a leak allowance program and getting a discount on some of the water that they have reduced being wasted by fixing their leaks.
Great. Well, we are at the end of our time today, so I just want to thank our panelists for joining us today and providing some great insight and participating in the study. You can access the full report online, and I'll get with Rachel after this and look at what questions we didn't get answered and see if we can reach out and give you some of that follow-up, since we didn't have time to get to all of them today. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.